Welcome to the ONS podcast with your host, Lynnaia Jacobsen.
Welcome back, you guys, to our ONS podcast brought to you by our partners at Face to Face Academy. ONS stands for Office of Neighborhood Safety. I'm your host, Lynnaia Jacobsen, and I'm a member of the ONS team. This podcast was created for departments like us and community organizations to come on and talk about our services. All of our episodes are about connecting you to alternative public safety measures, programs, and your local growth and healing opportunities. Today, joining us is Moms Demand Action, which is a grassroots movement of Americans fighting for public safety measures that can protect people from gun violence. The organization was founded by Shannon Watts, who is a mother of 5 who took to social media in rage after the senseless Sandy Hook elementary shootings in Connecticut. Her opinions and emotions were validated by many reading her post, who then joined her desire to take action and do more. Today, please help me welcome St. Paul's branch Kathleen Doyle Anderson, Gretchen Damon, and Dawn Ian Walter. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Lynnaia.
So, Kathleen, I always start with some icebreaker questions, and yeah. All right. So, which best describes you? Home cooked meals 7 nights a week, or kids, which fast foodie do you want because mama needs a break?
I often need a break, but I do a lot of home-cooked meals. I would have to say home-cooked meals 6 nights a week.
Okay. So what's your quickest, easiest, mom, fast, home-cooked meal to make?
Oh, gosh. Just last night, I did quesadillas with refried beans and cheese and some sauteed spinach for the adults.
Oh, okay. You had to throw a vegetable in there?
Yep.
All right. What's the kids' favorite fast food to eat, really?
McDonald's.
McDonald's.
Yeah. / Shake Shack. They are born in Brooklyn, so
okay.
They respect Shake Shack.
Okay. All right. So give me a 30-second to 1 minute spiel about yourself.
Sure. My name is Kathleen Anderson, as Lynnaia said, and I am a clinical social worker and mom to 3 young children. I was born in Minneapolis, but grew up in Florida, and then spent some time in D.C. and New York City before moving back out here about 6 years ago.
Awesome. Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dawn Einwalter. Dawn, welcome. I have questions for you. It's a sunny Saturday afternoon. Which would you rather be doing? Going on a nice leisurely bike ride, sitting on a nice rooftop downtown, having some lunch and cool drinks with friends, or a nice walk down Grand, zigzagging in and out of the shops?
Oh my God, all of those sound great.
I know, I made it hard on purpose.
I would probably take the lunch on the rooftop first.
Okay.
Then the bike ride, and then the shopping.
And then the shopping. Oh, so you're going for all 3. Just in that order, though. I was reading through your bio, and I saw that you like to do vertical endeavors.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to picture you climbing this rock wall because I have, no upper body strength. And you do it. You get up there.
Yeah, well, you have to work up to it.
Yeah.
I like to climb well, and so this means that I've got to do a lot of extra weightlifting at home.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of your strength is on your hands, which most people don't think about exercising, so I have these grip extenders that I use to
That is the best fun fact that I learned about you. I'm just trying to, so over Christmas break, me and my son, we went to Vertical Endeavors, and I was going to try it for the first time, and he had never tried it either. When I tell you I couldn't get 2 feet off the ground, I literally could not, I have no upper body strength. My bottom half was ugh. It was not going.
It's hard.
So, Dawn, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I am mostly from the West Coast. I lived in Seattle, then I lived in California, and I have a background in cultural anthropology. I got a PhD in it, which isn't always terribly useful, but I then took it to study mediation. And so I've had an interest in public safety for a really long time. And mediation used to be kind of like CVI is now. It was the fashionable thing to do.
Yeah.
So I went to China and I studied a kind of mediation that was sort of weird from a Western perspective. It's strangers will actually step in and resolve disputes with people that they see are fighting. And it's a recognized practice. And what I took away from that was that in that Chinese context, they have something called yielding. It translates to yielding. And so there's this belief that you should step back. And Americans are kind of like all about winning.
Yeah.
And we could learn a little bit from the Chinese practice of yielding, in my opinion. So after I did mediation for a while, I got an interest in land use and how that helped with public safety.
Yeah.
And then I moved here about 10 years ago, and I've been working on family stuff and public service stuff. I'm on the Neighborhood Safety Community Council.
Yes. Shout out.
And I am with Moms, and I also am on my local district council board.
That's awesome. You're busy.
Trying to do what I can do and still fit that bike ride and lunch
And that
with
rooftop.
friends in. Yes.
Thank you for that. All right. And third, we have MDA superhero, Gretchen Damon. Welcome, Gretchen.
Thank you so much.
So, big breakfast and skip lunch, or big lunch and skip dinner? You have to choose one. One of them has to be sacrificed.
I'm getting hungry. I pick a big breakfast and skip lunch.
Okay, what's your favorite thing to eat for breakfast?
Pancakes.
Pancakes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Gretchen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I was an educator for about 25 years, and that was a great job and worked well with having a family. My 2 kids went off and found their own life, went off to college and became adults. And I went back to school for horticulture, actually. I got a degree in horticulture. And then I went to work at St. Catherine University as a professional gardener. Gardening happens to be my hobby as well. So it was a perfect job.
It's always nice when you get those jobs that you like, those degrees and things that you really, really desire, right? That you like to do.
Yeah, I was so happy I found it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. So I just want to start off a little bit different than I normally start off, just because we're on the topic of gun violence prevention education. And I just kind of wanted to open it up for like 5 minutes to so that I could get a better understanding from you guys and your personal thoughts about why gun violence prevention education is so important. So anyone wants to start off, you can.
I think for us, the reason that gun violence education, prevention education is so important is that gun violence is increasingly surrounding us in our country, and people feel really helpless in the face of it. They don't know what to do. There's unfortunately this feeling of it almost being inevitable. And a big part of our work and the shift from gun violence being just a public safety conversation to a public health conversation is that none of this is inevitable. These are not acts of God. These are choices that we are making at the individual, family, community, and national level to not to limit, the amount of guns in our communities and people's access to guns in the community, the places where guns can be. And there are things that we can do to change those policies. And so just really trying to look at evidence-based practices that we can all implement, again, at that individual, family, community level to prevent all of these acts of gun violence. And so I think just giving people that power, that education, that knowledge, that data is powerful, and it helps us turn from feeling helpless to feeling hopeful and beginning to move into action on it. And that's really what our group is all about, saying we don't want to live like this anymore. We don't want to get these news reports about mass shootings. We don't want to be worried about our kids going to and from school or going over to a friend's house.
Yeah.
We want to feel safe in our homes and in our communities, and we can do something about that. And so that's the education piece is a part of that cultural change that will lead to the policy change that we hope to see.
Yeah. Gretchen, what do you think?
That was well said, Kathleen. Thank you. I think part of our education, too, is there are some policies that we've helped to pass, and some of those ordinances and laws are only as good as the paper they're written on if people don't know about them. Mm-hmm. So some of our education has been about, in St. Paul, there is an ordinance requiring people to store their guns in a secure manner. And also in Minnesota, we have a new law that we're advocating and educating people about, which are extreme risk protection orders. Both of those policies can really save lives, and we try to bring to people that we meet what those are about, and they're really within a culture of responsible gun ownership.
And Dawn, what do you think? Why do you think that gun violence prevention education is so important?
I think that one of the things that we're trying to do is move the conversation away from the extraordinary. People tend to think about mass shootings as their first thought when it comes to gun violence. And really, we want to talk to people about daily behavior.
Yes.
Where they live, what they do, how they handle their firearms. I mean, really, this is reaching out to gun owners and saying, hey, when you get home, what do you do with your gun? Are you if you had it in your car, do you bring it in the house? Do you set it on the dining room table and leave it there while you go off and do a few chores? Let me say that one of the things that I like to do is scenario planning. I like to talk things through with people and say, so if this thing happens, what would you do? So if you put your firearm on the table when you get home, what happens next? Now think this through with me. So I think to the extent that we can make this something that people can identify with in their personal lives, as opposed to an extraordinary situation that doesn't involve them, then we help them think about their own responsibility and their own safety.
I agree. I think there needs to be more conversations about it. I think things happen, and then when things happen, then people go back and go, oh, you know what I mean? We should have talked about that, or we should have tried to prevent that, or we should have did some education around that. And my whole thing is like, let's start forward thinking, people. Let's start thinking ahead. How can we get ahead of things? And I think that the more conversations we have about it, then people will start to understand like the impact that it's really having. Because I think that sometimes as Americans, we don't think about impact until it's right in our backyard. Until it's something that happens to us, one of our family members, one of our friends, one of our coworkers. We see stuff on the news all the time. But unless something happens directly to impact us, we don't think about it, and there's no conversations about it.
On that note, I think there's one thing that Kathleen might like to talk about, which has to do with parents and young children.
Yeah, we're going to get to it. We're going to unwrap everything. But let me start the first question out with you, Dawn. Who and what is Moms Demands Action? I know I gave a little blurb at the beginning, but what can you give us that covers a little bit more about that?
Well, I think one of the things that's important to recognize is that Moms Demand Action is almost entirely volunteers. And in Minnesota, that's right up to the state level. So even our state leadership, they're all volunteers. So we don't even have any paid staff until we get to the regional level. And what that means is all these people that you see out in these red shirts that are doing something, virtually every mom that you see is a volunteer. So we're really motivated, and we give a lot of our time because we really love this, what we're doing, and we love this subject. The other thing I wanted to share is that Shannon Watts established this organization, but we have new leadership. It's Angela Farrell-Zabala, and she took over within the last year. And she is, I think, taking the organization in new directions. I know she's spending a lot of time on equity and inclusivity, and I really cannot see us, I'm going to be super blunt here, I really cannot see us backing off from this issue at this point with her leadership.
Amen. So where did your passion come from in this? And I'll let you start off here, Dawn.
Well, the mediation was part of it, just a belief that we have the power to do something. A lot of times when you're in a mediation, people come and they're like, meh, 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 meh. They totally cannot see the other side. And then it's incremental. You get them to move a little bit and move a little bit. And pretty soon they say, oh, yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, we can do that. And I feel like that is something that we can do here as well. That with even as polarized and as difficult as gun violence prevention can be, that every little incremental piece that we get helps people understand and secure their own safety a little bit better.
What about you, Kathleen? Where does your passion for this work come from?
So when I was in college, I was in Washington, D.C., and started working in youth development and mentorship and education. And so that was really my first exposure to guns was the youth that I was working with largely in Ward 8 in Southeast D.C., and just the trauma that they were experiencing and that they were coming into the school day with. And that just broke my heart, that they were scared to go to school. They were hearing gunshots at night. And then when I continued my career going to school in New York City to become a clinical social worker, my first job afterwards was doing a diversion program for justice system involved youth. And so similar things. And that was, and then dealing also with a lot of clients who were struggling with suicidal ideation and just knowing the risks of firearm suicide and the unique lethality there. So when I took a step back, when my children were born, I got involved with Moms Demand Action. And in Brooklyn, they had these like rapid response networks. And so after a shooting, they would almost hold a rally at the spot that the shooting had taken place to sort of say, like, us, the community, we don't accept this. We don't want to see this violence. And really talk about healing and needing to show up for one another and be better. And it was really powerful. That was kind of my first way of showing up in the movement. So when I moved out here, I got reconnected with moms, and I'm really involved in the secure storage education and then firearm suicide prevention, since that's the leading cause of gun deaths in Minnesota.
That's awesome. I'm going to say something that we may have to edit out later, but I'm going to say something real controversial. I want to go back to where you were talking about how in Brooklyn, when things like that were happening, the community showed up for each other. And that's really, really something that I wish Minnesota would start doing. We have a habit of showing up when there is something like an officer-involved shooting or something else that takes out one of our youth via gun violence, but we do not show up when it's one-on-one, when it's against each other. And that is something that I would really like to see the elders in the community and us parents in the community show up for and just say, stop it, because that is a problem. And I like that Brooklyn is ahead of us on that, and I would like to see us get there.
Yeah, I'm happy to share some of the organizations I would work with, because I kind of used my connections in the neighborhoods and with the different community violence interrupters at the time. It was Save Our Streets was one of them, but just great models to follow.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Gretchen, where did your passion come from in this work?
Well, I'll have to say it kind of fell into it. 2016 politically was a difficult year, and I felt like I need to do something to make my community safer. And I went to a remembrance walk for a woman who had been killed by gun violence. And Merritt Brock, our original founder of the St. Paul group, was there and introduced herself to me and invited me to a meeting. And I went, and I thought, these people are organized, they're passionate, and it's moms demand action, not moms demand talk about it or moms demand complain about it.
Yeah, there we go.
Action, and that action really helps me. So I stuck with it since then, and I have to say I continue to be motivated a lot by our survivor speakers, people who have been impacted by gun violence, listening to brave people talk about losing their child or their parent or their sibling because of gun violence. For me, at least, I think this should stop. There's just too much trauma, and that trauma stays with that survivor for the rest of their lives. So that keeps me going, and also the awesome St. Paul people in our group. I really enjoy the people that I work with.
And that's a good segue, because what is unique about the St. Paul branch of Moms Demand Action?
Well, besides the wonderful people in the group and the fact that we get a lot of things done, we do live in the capital city. And there are groups of Mom Demand Action across the state, north, south, east, west, but we are the group that lives in the capital city. And the Capitol is in our backyard. We go there a lot. And we go there when the legislators come back to the session. We go to committee hearings when there's a gun bill being talked about. We even testify sometimes. We go to the floor to hear debate. And we know where to park. We know what door to go in. We know where the
'Cause you're there
bathrooms
all the
are.
time.
We're there all the time. And so when people who aren't living in St. Paul come, we can say, take our hand. We are not afraid of this building. We are not afraid to talk to representatives and senators. So I think that's unique. And the other thing I would say is unique is the leaders that we have in St. Paul, the elected officials, the policymakers. We do not have to spend time convincing them that gun violence is a top priority and that there are things we can do, sensible things we can do to reduce gun violence, from the great St. Paul representatives and lawmakers to Ramsey County Attorney John Choi, who has been a gun sense champion for a long time and does events with us and asks us to do events, and to the City Council, St. Paul City Council, especially Rebecca Naker, and then Mayor Carter. You know, he is such an advocate, almost a friend of ours. We're in his office a lot. It helps that we bring him cookies. But he is really respectful of us and trusts us. And then, you know, here we live in a city that has the Office of Neighborhood Safety. I mean, not every big city with gun violence issues has an Office of Neighborhood Safety. So very happy to be here as part of that, and just feeling very fortunate that we have leaders that we don't have to fight to put gun violence prevention on the agenda. It's already there. So living in the capital city, and then our great leaders that we can collaborate with.
Thank you, Gretchen, and thanks for the shout out.
Of course.
So let's dive a little bit deeper. Kathleen, how do parents have gun safety conversations with their children and other parents? Because I think that's one of the things that gets missed the most. Like, people, when you say gun violence, people think like, you know, one-on-one crime or, you know, other stuff like that. I think that people don't really realize that it starts with a conversation.
Absolutely. Well, and another thing, too, is it often happens in the home. Estimates are about 60% of gun violence happens in the homes, not out in the streets, not at schools or nightclubs or bars, but in the home. And so those conversations have to be happening at home as well. One of the things that is really important to us is just that parents have that conversation early and often. It's not a one-time conversation, just like talking about alcohol, drugs, sex,
Right.
all of those things. You know, you don't just suddenly sit down a 15-year-old and start talking about it. You know, you kind of start talking about that stuff early on, and we want guns to be a part of those safety conversations. With young kids, the emphasis is on keeping it simple. If you see a gun, don't touch it. Tell an adult right away. Really emphasizing that not to touch any guns, you know, even something that looks like could be a toy, but to stay away, and that kids won't get in trouble for getting an adult in that situation. And with adolescents, you know, again, repeating that conversation, but also giving them strategies. So if they're with friends and somebody says, no, it's fine, it's not loaded, like, A, not believing them, right, not taking them at their word, but also having strategies or agreed upon things in advance, like, hey, my mom just texted, I gotta go, you know, kind of giving them exit strategies to get out of an unsafe situation. We also want to be modeling for kids responsible behavior. So if you have a gun in the home, storing it secured. That means best practice is unloaded, locked with the ammunition stored separately, and talking to your kids about a gun is a powerful weapon. It isn't something to be played with. It's not something to be waved around or boasted about. You know, we have this in our house for a reason, whether that's protection or sport or hunting, but this is something to be taken seriously, and really modeling that for them. And if you don't have a gun, modeling having conversations about guns in other homes that your kids might visit. And so we want parents, again, beginning at an early age, talking to family members and friends. If your kid's going over to grandma's house for for an overnight or starting to do drop-off play dates and things, having conversations about guns in the home. Let me correct that. Gun storage in the home. We want the focus to be on whether people are storing their guns responsibly, not whether they have a gun. So asking if there are guns in the home, how are they secured, puts the focus on how people are practicing secure storage, not whether they've made the decision to be a gun owner or not. And that helps destigmatize that question a little bit, because as you said, it is a taboo and people are uncomfortable with this. But we really want to emphasize and normalize that conversation. We ask about allergens. We ask about pets, pools, alcohol access when kids are older. The American Academy of Pediatrics agrees, like, guns are the number one lead killer of children across the United States. Like, this needs to be a part of our safety checklist when we're talking to other people who we're entrusting in our child's care. Because again, you don't want to go back and say, I wish I had asked that question. So asking about secure storage, offering up that information. If you don't have a gun, I say, hey, just a heads up, we have a small dog, no guns in the home. Are there any allergies or food restrictions I need to be aware of? And kind of sandwich
kind of mix it in there.
Yeah, like this is a normal thing to talk about.
Yeah, that was slick, Kathleen. That was real slick.
Oh, yeah.
I like the part that you said about how, like, asking other parents, like, is there a gun in the home? Those sorts of things, because I think sometimes that helps them remember, oh, yeah, that's right. Because like me, I don't have little kids in the home. And I do have a firearm, but I have 2 different safes. So depending on where I am, it's in that particular safe. And so just like raising that question, like when I was hearing you talk about it, it just instantly made me think, where's mine at? Which safe is it in? But like, I know it's in a safe. So just even like mentioning that helps people, remind people of, hey, there's a little kid coming over. That's right. Where is my gun? For people like me who don't like use it or carry it all the time. You know what I mean? Sometimes you forget, like, where is it again? So.
And people get nervous about this conversation, and that's just work that we have to do, is, again, normalizing it. But really, in our experience, the majority of gun owners are responsible gun owners and are very proud of the steps that they take. You're just like, I have 2 safes. People are happy to provide that information, and if they get defensive or are sort of squirrely about it, that's a bit of a red flag. It's just better offer for kids to come over to your house or meet out at a park, do something else, change your plans.
How do individuals make safe choices when it comes to guns?
Yeah, we touched on it. Just the number one thing is that if you make the decision to have a gun in the home, figuring out the best, most reliable, dependable choice for you for securely storing it. Cable gun locks are a great kind of preliminary option to prevent like accidental firings and things, or young kids getting into them. But especially if you have older kids, more resourceful teenagers, and are concerned about gun theft at all, we really want to make sure that like biometric gun safes that you can get into quickly are really going to be the best choice for your family. Something that Gretchen touched on with extreme risk protection orders is also considering, like, you might make a choice to bring a gun into the home, but that might be a choice you want to re-examine if you have any sort of crisis happening in your family.
Yeah, good advice.
I'm going to talk about, that other taboo, which is suicide. I have a child with autism who struggles with impulse control. We wouldn't have a gun in the home for that reason, right? Or like, say, a teenager's going through a difficult, tumultuous time. Very common. A little cable gun lock's not going to keep them from an impulsive decision to attempt suicide. Okay, so when a gun is used in a suicide attempt, it is fatal 90% of the time versus 3 to 4% of other attempts. And so if a youth in crisis or an adult in crisis has that overwhelming urge to attempt suicide and they use a gun, it is most likely going to be fatal. There's no time to be interrupted, to change your mind, to be discovered and receive medical attention. And so one of the things that nobody really likes to talk about, but is important too, is that if you know someone and you're seeing some of the warning signs of suicide and you have a gun in the home, even if it's secured, you might want to consider giving the keys to someone else, storing the gun outside of the home. And then the new ERPO law that Gretchen mentioned, that's called an extreme risk protection order. And so that's if you can actually petition for a temporary removal of the gun from the home. Say if it's an adult who doesn't want to relinquish it, you can ask the courts to say, hey, you're having a hard time. We're going to take that from you temporarily while you get some help. And that's also useful in times of other crisis if a threat's been made to somebody else, domestic violence situations, et cetera. And so that's something that when we talk about safe choices with gun ownership is paying attention to an evolving situation at home and with your loved one.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about the repercussions for a parent or a homeowner if a child gets a hold of a gun in the home? Dawn, what do you think?
Well, I think that there's a special repercussion if you live in St. Paul, because St. Paul has a law that Gretchen helped to get passed.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, Gretchen, go ahead.
It was a bumpy road. It took a lot of work, and I had help from other people. But in St. Paul, there is an ordinance. It's been in effect a couple years. And if you are a gun owner in St. Paul, as long as you are in view of that gun, you have a license to have it or carry it, and you are holding it, you can see it, it's in your grasp, no problem. Once you are away from that gun, if you leave it at home and you go away, or you leave it in your car and you go shopping, you must lock that gun. And that is the law in St. Paul. Any gun that's unattended needs to be locked. In St. Paul, we have that ordinance, and I said this before, it's only as good as the paper it's written on if you don't tell people about it. Mm-hmm. And so we have spent, probably 18 months talking to people about it. We put something in all the district council newsletters. We talked to houses of worship about this policy. We talked to the city council about it, and they published what they could. So we sort of shouted from the rooftops that a very responsible thing for gun owners to do is to lock their gun when it is unattended.
Congratulations, you guys.
Thank you.
That's a big deal. So you guys are full of so much information. I have so many questions, but tell us about some of the volunteer events MDA participates in around the city in St. Paul. So we know you guys are the moms and sometimes dads in the red shirts, but tell us about some of the events.
Yeah, thanks for reminding us that we are not just moms. We sometimes use the term mothers and others to remind ourselves and people outside of moms that anybody can get involved. Mm-hmm. And we also have Students Demand Action as well, so students can get involved, join our group as well. To answer your question about what kind of events we go to, in addition to speaking at the organizations that Gretchen just mentioned, we do a lot of fun public outreach, especially during the summer. Safe Summer Nights.
Yes.
We try to be at those.
Yes.
Brings out the whole neighborhood. Selby Jazz Fest, we've done that sometimes. We've done the event at Central. I'm not sure I've got the name right. I think it's Central Honors Philando.
Okay, yeah.
So the Philando Castile event every year. Trying to think of others. I mean, there's so many. Oftentimes we will get a request and we just look around and see who's available, and then we reach out to the organization on a one-on-one basis rather than tabling. One that I'm really looking forward to this summer that we haven't done in the past is we're going to be at the Hmong International Freedom Festival.
Awesome.
And that is a big commitment for us because they run for 2 full days.
Yeah,
but we're going to do it.
2 full long days.
Yeah.
Do you guys still do the Day on the Hill at the Capitol?
Oh, the Advocacy Day.
Do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Advocacy Day and back to the Capitol as well.
Awesome. Last question. What are your goals for the city of St. Paul?
We have several, but I'm going to talk about one. And Kathleen brought it up, but it's worth repeating. There is a state law that we advocated for, and it was passed 2 years ago, maybe a year ago. It's been implemented for at least a year, and those are extreme risk protection orders. It is a tool that we are excited about for people to know and to use. Other states that have extreme risk protection orders in place show a decrease in gun deaths and gun injuries. And this is a tool that comes into play when there is someone having a mental health crisis, extreme mental health crisis, and the family knows there are guns in the home or that the person has access to the guns. And that's a very dangerous situation, not only for the person in crisis, but for the household and the neighborhood and the vicinity.
Yeah.
So what do? A family member can file for an extreme risk protection order online, hard copy. You can get help from law enforcement, from city or county attorneys. And that order is set before a judge who determines, yes, this is a situation where a person has a potential to harm themselves or others. So let's do something about it. And then within 24 hours, those firearms are transferred out of the possession of the person in a safe and peaceful manner. And that's what we hear, that when those transfers happen, it's not a big hullabaloo. It's usually peaceful, and everyone is relieved that this has happened. So that is one big goal in terms of education for 2025, that we let people know that they can use this law. And we've heard stories of people really being relieved when they are able to get the help outside of the home to de-escalate the crisis. So that's one very important sort of new goal for us for 2025.
Kathleen, what about you? What about a goal that you have for the City of St. Paul?
We've been working, part of our secure storage education is under a program called Be Smart, and we've been working to just continue to develop our network of partners who help get that information about secure gun storage home to families. I work a lot with the medical community, so always looking to connect with different medical groups and practices throughout the state and in St. Paul, so that pediatricians are actually having those conversations with families, but also working with the schools. And now that we finally have our new superintendent, wanting to reinvigorate those efforts to see if, anytime there's an incident of a firearm on campus or concerns about, or God forbid, a shooting, that's an easy thing that the district can remind families of. Like, one of the number one things that families can do to keep school communities safe is make sure that any guns in the home are secured. And so just making sure that that message home to families is being repeated and repeated often, because that plays a huge role in keeping our kids safe at school as well. The Secret Service has said that 3/4 of school shootings are the result of weapons that are taken directly from the home by a youth that wouldn't otherwise have them.
And Dawn, what about you?
Well, we really value our community partners, and we're always looking for new opportunities to expand that. In the last few months, we've been really working on expanding into the east side. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to make a plug for how you can get a hold of us.
Go ahead, girl. Go ahead. I was going to do it anyway, so go ahead. I'll let you do it.
STP, Moms Demand Action, all one word, at gmail.com. You can send us an email and ask for someone to contact your group, and we'll be happy to.